In San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, the U.S. and China hunker down for a long trade war as the latest round of tariffs hit, bringing more tech into the firing line. Plus, SiriusXM buying Pandora for $3.5 billion, giving the satellite radio company a leg up in the competition with Spotify. We'll look at the high notes of the deal. And Apple teams up with Salesforce in a deal to bring more business apps to the iPhone and iPad. We'll look at how Siri and Face ID are set to be adapted. First to our top story, the world's two biggest economies are digging in for what could be a long and bruising trade war. The latest U.S. tariffs on $200 billion of Chinese goods came into effect just after midnight Eastern Monday, with China responding with duties of its own on $60 billion of U.S. imports. This latest round hits the tech world with levies on industries like semiconductors and consumer goods. After some heavy lobbying by Apple and others, however, goods like Apple Watches and other fitness trackers and wireless headphones and speakers got a reprieve this time around. Let's talk about all of this with Bloomberg Tech's Selena Wang and Amy Selico, who is a principal of Albright Stonebridge Group, leading the China team in Washington. She was previously Senior Director for China Affairs at the USTR. So, Amy, first of all, how long is this trade war going to be?
Well, I don't think anyone can see the end in sight at this point, especially given how both sides tend to be really digging in. Even though it's a holiday in China today, the Mid-Autumn Festival, the Chinese government, of course, did put in place those retaliatory tariffs that you already mentioned. They also released a white paper on U.S.-China trade, accusing the United States of trade bullyism, taking no responsibility. And so this looks set to continue to go from Beijing into the near to midterm future. On the U.S. side, as you know, President Trump has already said that he would retaliate against China for pursuing additional tariffs against the United States. So we're waiting for the next set of tariffs will be put in place, announced first, any day now.
Now, Selena, U.S. companies speaking out, Intel saying this is a game changer to the American consumer. You've got Google, Dell, IBM all talking about how this is increasing cost on U.S. consumers. Walk us through the actual tech impacts here, because now we're talking about almost half of all goods that are imported to the U.S. from China being taxed.
Right, we've had Apple and Fitbit lobby very hard so they were able to get fitness trackers, wireless speakers, their AirPods off of that list, but we have heard tech companies speak out very strongly about this. It's going to hurt some of these telecom companies, chip makers, really companies that power the heart of the internet the hardest. And we have Intel saying that they manufacture and design most of their products actually in the U.S., and there's only a small part of the value chain that's done in China. That's the assembly aspect, and that is going to be taxed. And Intel says it's not really reasonable or possible for them to really shift that supply somewhere else. They're going to continue to need to assembly there. We have Google, Dell, IBM saying the tariffs are going to hurt American consumers the most, and it's actually going to put America behind in some of the most innovative technologies in the future, including 5G, and it could actually help China in a certain sense.
Amy, what are the choices facing these American companies right now? Certainly, they can always consider moving their production out of China. Nobody knows, though, as you said, how long this is going to last.
Absolutely. I think for Chinese companies, I agree with Selena. For American companies, moving their supply chain out of China is not something that can be done before January 1st, the date that these new tariffs are set to go from 10% rate to 25% rate. And so that's very difficult for American companies to make that shift so quickly. So as Selena just said, consumers are the ones who are going to really bear the brunt of this round of tariffs. However, in the meantime, American companies have to be thinking about what do they do to diversify their global supply chain. President Trump has made it very clear that bringing supply chains back to the United States is what he would like to see. And again, when we're talking about U.S.-China trade, this disentanglement between the United States and the Chinese economies is what many are starting to see as one of the goals of President Trump's very tough stance against China here.
Meantime, Selena, the president has, of course, threatened, to tariff all of the goods coming in from China. That means an additional $267 billion worth that has, thus far remained untariffed. Does that mean that those Apple products, that those fitness trackers, that our iPhones potentially will be hit?
We don't know yet what that actually means. We've seen some of these companies have a little bit of power in terms of getting sway. There were several hundred products that were left off this most recent list, some of it as a result of lobbying efforts from these companies. There's a lot of concern that, if Trump does that, China can ratchet up some of their other retaliatory measures, including increasing regulatory red tape, making it very hard for these American multinational companies to grow their business in China. And that would be hugely a huge issue for a company like Apple, and that's a big concern, making harder import inspections, more taxes, etc. And that's really the big concern as Trump continues to levy even stronger tariffs that China could put on even heavier regulatory burdens.
Now, Amy, China has pulled out from the negotiations, and they only have a certain amount of goods left that they can tariff. Of course, the U.S. imports far more goods from China than China imports from the United States. So how far do you see this tit for tat going, and how do you expect the Chinese to react?
Well, I think the Chinese pulled out of the prospect of talks this week and next because I think a reality is sinking in Beijing that waiting until after the midterm elections may offer better opportunity for actually making a deal. I think many in Beijing see that President Trump's actions, while some of it they characterize as containment of China, they also say much of it is in order to appeal to his base in advance of the midterm elections. And so maybe there's another opportunity to re-engage with talks after the midterms take place here and in advance of Presidents Trump and President Xi meeting on the sidelines of the G20 meetings at the end of November. That's an opportunity. To answer your other question, I think Selena really hit the nail on the head. China doesn't have that much more in the quantitative responses it can take to American policies. And so they've long said they will also be taking qualitative measures in response to the U.S. application of tariffs. That's going to include, as Selena already said, slowing approvals, delaying goods at customs, maybe increasing the amount of inspections that American manufacturers face on the ground in China, basically making it harder for American companies to operate there. This is in strong contradiction to what we just heard from Premier Li Keqiang when he was speaking at the WEF in Tianjin last week, and he said foreign investors do not face discrimination in the China market. We'll see what happens.
All right, Albright Stonebridge Group's Amy Selico, thank you so much for joining us, as well as Bloomberg Tech's Selena Wang, just back from a trip to Asia. Thank you so much. Coming up, Snapchat wants to help you shop. Could a new visual search tool be the answer to the social media company's troubles? We'll discuss next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Snap is teaming up with e-commerce king Amazon to offer a long and elusive retail experience. Snapchat users will be able to point the camera, the Snapchat camera, at a product they see in the real world to scan its image or barcode. If Amazon recognizes the item, it'll present a link to purchase it on the retail giant's app or website. So, can this feature help Snap with disappointing revenue and user growth? Will this revolutionize the online commerce experience? For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg Tech Sarah Fryer, who covers Snap, and Bloomberg's head of global tech, Brad Stone. So, Sarah, how exactly is this going to work?
So basically, when you open up your Snapchat camera, if you were going to use that to send something to a friend or share what you're doing, you can also now use it to shop. And maybe that's not exactly what we would expect to be doing when we open up the Snap camera, but now we have that option. And when we look at the real world, say if I like your shoes or I like your watch, I can take a picture of it. And then if it connects with what's on Amazon's website, Amazon will help me buy it. So it is really just like a new use case for the Snapchat camera.
So why would Amazon team up with Snap on this?
Well, I mean, let's put it in context. Amazon has been on this kind of visual search path now for 10 years.
Right, and it hasn't worked out.
Well, not really. I mean, at one point they had Mechanical Turk workers identifying images, and they acquired a company called Snaptel. It brought some of the technology in-house. 2 years ago, they released a service for AWS recognition with a K instead of a C, which makes visual search available as an API tool for other apps. So it's been doing this for a while. I think for Snapchat, those are what is it, 300 million monthly users, most of them young. A market that Amazon has been trying to tap in all sorts of different ways with services like Prime Student.
So it sounds great, right? Is it going to work?
Great. Well, the thing is that you have to sort of build a new behavior, right? Because when people open the camera, the reason why Snap has you open to a camera is because it's the creative experience. You want to share something that you're doing with people who are your friends or share it with your Snap story. Are people going to use it just to figure out what to buy in the real world? It seems like a marketer's dream. Like you see someone's shoes on the subway and you want them, and you can buy them then.
And wouldn't a partnership with handset makers make more sense?
Well, actually, they've been doing that. So like some of the visual search tools are available on Samsung phones and Sony phones. Amazon has been introducing these kinds of partnerships. With Snap, I think it's that really devoted, youthful audience for whom Snap is really their portal to everything online.
So talk to us, Sarah, about what this actually could mean for Snap, given they've got a lot of other problems to work out.
They're not disclosing the financial relationship, but obviously that's why the stock is being helped a little bit by this announcement. Amazon usually provides affiliate revenue to people who direct traffic to the Amazon website. So if Snap's partnership is anything like that, this could be another source for them to make money besides advertising. And advertising has been a little wonky on Snap because everything disappears, that they don't really collect a lot of as much user data as Facebook and Instagram do. So maybe this is another avenue for them to make up for some of that growth that's a lot slower than analysts and investors expected it to be.
And is this something, a partnership that exists with Facebook or Instagram, or?
I haven't seen. We know that Amazon may partner with Facebook for their new home devices with Alexa. That's a little bit different than this. I know on Instagram has their own kind of shopping tool where if you see something in an ad that you want to buy, you can click on it, see how much it costs, and buy it right there on Instagram. And that actually has been pretty successful because people think of Instagram as a sort of aspirational place to be inspired for. Here's what I want to look like. Here's what I want to buy. Pinterest has some similar tools. This is different though. I mean, we mostly use Snapchat for chatting with our friends, and this is another kind of behavior that they're going to have to train users to become comfortable with.
What's the bigger vision for Amazon here, Brad, especially in the context of all the devices that Amazon unveiled last week, some of which do seem a bit experimental?
It's getting people inside the Amazon ecosystem, touching them wherever they live, however old they are. If it's a college student who gets Prime for half off, if it's, an 18 or perhaps younger, a person who's using Snap, maybe shouldn't be, who doesn't have a Prime account, bringing them to the Amazon website and helping them make a, transaction. I think that's the vision. Amazon wants its services to be everywhere, and, Snap opens another horizon for them.
We're going to talk a little bit later in the show about some of the privacy issues here. But, is it really all about data? Does this help expand the amount of data that Amazon has on a user, and now it's a Snap user?
Well, the main thing that advertisers and social media companies want to achieve in these kinds of relationships is what's called attribution. They want to make sure that they can say, we had Snap users doing this activity and it actually led to a purchase. So if they can say that Snap users are actually buying stuff on Snap, using our app and converting directly to a purchase, that's a much stronger signal for any marketer than sort of the brand resonance or any of the other things that they may be trying to achieve. That purchase is the ultimate goal. So if they can achieve that right there on Snap in the camera, that's a huge win for them for explaining the value of their product.
All right, Sarah Fryer, Brad Stone, Bloomberg Technology. Thank you both. Brad, you're going to be here a little bit later too. All right. Speaking of Amazon partnerships, be sure to tune in to tomorrow's show. We're going to hear from J.Crew CEO Jim Brett. This after J.Crew's recent announcement that it would start selling some of its items from the J.Crew mercantile line on Amazon. Coming up, further consolidation in the music space as SiriusXM is set to buy Pandora in an all-stock $3.5 billion deal. We will have more on that next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology, and be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. Now, in deal news, SiriusXM will acquire Pandora Media in a deal worth $3.5 billion. The deal allows Sirius to expand into online music, competing with streaming leaders Spotify and Apple Music. Joining us now to talk about the details, Jitendra Rawal of Bloomberg Intelligence. So, how does Sirius plan to integrate Pandora into the service?
Well, the idea is, first of all, this deal was a long time coming.
Right, they had a big
stake. We've been waiting for it for a while now, and the idea here is, like, Sirius is big, obviously, in autos, and Pandora gives them a large pool of, streaming service users. Obviously, what they plan to do is, A, from a defensive side, sort of protect their dominance in automotive by having that digital presence, and B, really see if they can cross-sell, because, we have 36 million subscribers on Sirius, you have 70 million plus listeners on Pandora, mostly ad-driven business, Sirius mostly subscription-driven business, and they see cross-selling opportunities there. So that's the sort of the game plan that they are going after, but they also have cost synergies, bringing these two things together. So when it comes to actually going after the bigger players, this is going to be very challenging because of the difference in strategies. But when it comes to making it work from a cost standpoint and cross-selling, there are opportunities.
Are they going after a different listener or a different listening case, though, than Spotify or Apple Music?
Longer term, not. In the interim, they obviously have their auto strength and things like that. But if you actually look at, how Pandora is sort of seeing some stabilization in listeners, and they're seeing some momentum in their premium subscription service, they couldn't really do it standalone. Longer term, they need some partner to scale it, and bringing them together also gives them some leverage on negotiations and things like that. So they have a better shot now versus before.
This is about $1 billion premium on Pandora's price right now. Over the years, we've talked so much about a potential Pandora acquisition. Would Apple buy them? Would they remain independent? And we've seen so many ups and downs. Is this a win for Pandora?
It's a good end goal, because that's what we've been sort of waiting for. Everybody is waiting for. Now, they still have a go shop period of 30 days where they can look for an alternative. It's unlikely that somebody would step up over here. I mean, we always thought somebody like Facebook or Snapchat would sort of blend well with Pandora, because they can integrate with messaging platforms and scale advertising. And Facebook has largely been missing out of the music space in general. But they have been doing this for 2 years now. They've been looking for it for 2 years now. So the likelihood is low, and also given a stake that Sirius already has in the company. But I think this was the likely outcome that everybody's waiting for. Now it's more on how much they can squeeze from costs, and can they really go after with this cross-selling.
So looking out a couple years from now, what does listener behavior actually look like? So is it still Spotify and Apple Music head-to-head?
Yeah. So if you look at the strategies of these companies, right, Spotify clearly has a data edge, and that's not going away. Despite of Apple competition, we've seen that growing. The consolidation that we've seen from the listener side, they gravitating towards one service or the other, will continue. So it'll be very difficult for them to sort of take that trend away from what Amazon's experiencing, Apple's experiencing, Spotify's experiencing. But when it comes to connected cars, automotive, where they are strong, if they can sort of marry their strength and hold on to the user base that Pandora has, then they can, maintain their niche and expand. Best case scenario, they're able to provide a better service than the two and get it, but it's very challenging.
All right, Jitendra Rawal, Bloomberg Intelligence, thank you so much for joining us. We should mention that Bloomberg Radio provides programming to SiriusXM. Sticking with M&A, Comcast deals the knockout blow to Sky to Fox for control of Sky. The U.S. cable magnate has agreed to pay $39 billion. However, shares of Comcast are having their worst day since 2009 as investors worry about this deal's high price tag. Joining us now with more, Bloomberg's Anusha Sakui in LA. Anusha, why are investors reacting so strongly here?
Well, just because of the sheer premium that Comcast has paid for Sky. They were pushed into a blind auction on Saturday by Fox and Disney. Comcast Brian Roberts holed up in London in a hotel, as we've been reporting, and Bob Iger and John Nayland of Bob Iger of Disney and John Nayland of Fox somewhere else in London, trying to compete for this asset, and it yielded a huge difference in price between the two, over £17 from Comcast and just above 15 from Fox. So shareholders are worried about the amount that they've paid. Is it going to be a question of winner's curse? One of their long-term holders is saying today, as we're reporting on the Bloomberg, that they're a buyer. So that's ClearBridge, and that they think that that's going to work out over the longer term. We'll see.
So I hate to say it this way, but it's the best word I can use to describe. Is there any ego at play here, given the big deal that Comcast lost out to when it came to those 21st Century Fox assets to Disney?
Some of the people that I've spoken to around this deal have said that, that Brian Roberts had to do this, and I think it does show in the price. Paying £17, that's a handle that I don't think I'd seen in any kind of analyst reports. People were surprised, and that's revealing in the share price today, like $12 billion wiped off of Comcast by some estimates. So I think that kind of supports the idea as well that he had to do this deal after losing out on some others, and he himself had said that it had become an important asset. Maybe Disney. I think from what some analysts are sort of speculating is that Rupert Murdoch might have liked Sky to have stayed within Disney, and Murdoch is going to be a big voice in Disney going forward as the biggest outside shareholder, but ultimately, he's a pragmatic businessman, and selling it to Comcast at over £17, I'm sure, we'll see what happens with the rest of the Fox stake. But it's clear he had to do this, and whether he'll be proved right, we'll have to wait and see, obviously.
In 30 seconds, Anusha, what's the bull case that this is a good deal for Comcast?
That being direct to consumer and global is vital for any big media company that wants to survive.
All right, Anusha Sakui for us in LA. As always, Anusha, thanks so much for stopping by. Coming up, security concerns mount for search giant Google. One security expert says Google had quietly made important changes to Chrome's login requirements. What that could mean for you and what you don't know about it next. Also ahead, a big tech hoping to encourage voter turnout in the midterms. Could part of the solution be just a ride away? This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Apple is joining forces with Salesforce. The partnership will aim to increase the number of apps available for businesses on iPhones and iPads. And as part of that tie-up, the Salesforce app will be updated to include Siri, Face ID, and iMessage. Let's bring in Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman from LA. So, Mark, this coincides with Salesforce's big Dreamforce conference happening this week. We know that Apple has been trying to make a big push into the enterprise. How much charge does this give?
Right. So, if we take a step back and look at all of Apple's enterprise partnerships announced over the past 2 years, they honestly seem extremely surface level in some ways obvious things that the company would have done anyways, right? So Salesforce is adding Face ID support, business chat, and other new features based on iOS 12 and the latest iPhones to their apps, which they should be doing anyways. They shouldn't really need an Apple partnership to get these things going. But from a branding perspective, it's great for both sides.
What do we really know about how much success Apple has made in the enterprise? I mean, we know that there's been this rise of bring your own device, and so if people, want to use iPhones, they can use their iPhones at work. But how well is Apple really being integrated into larger business enterprises?
It seems like every month or even every few weeks or so, we see another company announcing internally or publicly that they're switching to iPhones or iPads away from more legacy devices like Blackberries or moving away from Android to the iPhone for one reason in particular. It's really the security element to it. The iPhone has some of the best enterprise-grade security features and the ability to provision phones depending on who the employees are. So there's a lot of good tools in there for enterprises. So that's why we're seeing a lot more companies switching to iOS.
Now, of course, consumers got their hands on new iPhones, new Apple Watches over the weekend. You've got a new piece out about how Apple's, coolest new feature isn't necessarily the fanciest, and you talk about the new chips. Why are you so excited about that?
Why am I so excited? I don't know if I'm excited as investors are and analysts are about this, but this new 512 gigabyte storage capacity makes Apple $241 to $247, depending on your math, dollars per phone more than the baseline 64 gigabyte model. So what we're really seeing here is Apple taking advantage of these higher capacities. They're pushing people to higher capacities with these higher resolution cameras and these screens that store higher resolution video and games that are more intense and take up much more space. So people are going to want to buy the higher capacities. And then the higher capacities, they cost consumers a lot of money, right? If you want to go from the 64 gigabyte to the 512, that's a $350 upcharge. Now that's a lot of money. I didn't even pay that, and I use these things for work and I have to test them all. But that's a lot of money for consumers, and Apple makes a big chunk of that money. These are highly profitable chips, these storage controllers.
You also pointed out that some of the heart features that Apple's offering with the new Apple Watch are only available in the U.S. thus far. What in general has been the feedback as customers have started using these devices in the last few days?
Right, so what I've seen, reception to the Apple Watch Series 4, that's the new model with the EKG monitor, the updated design, the additional software functionality for that bigger screen. That's so far been the hit of the product release that Apple has going on throughout the rest of this year. There'll be many more products. We'll be talking about those soon, I'm sure. But yeah, the Apple Watch Series 4 has been the hit, and it's going to get some more attention and press later in the year when they actually activate the EKG monitor. There are some people trying to figure out how to turn on the EKG on their new Apple Watches this weekend, but the reality is that feature's not available yet. It's coming out later in the year, according to Apple.
All right, Mark Gurman, I'm sure you'll be on not too long from now, once again, talking about the new stuff. As always, thank you so much. Tomorrow, we will be interviewing Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, joining us on Bloomberg Technology from the Dreamforce conference in San Francisco. Do not miss that conversation. Now, to another story we are watching. Security and privacy issues continue to consume big tech. This time, it's Google in the spotlight. The company has been outed for quietly making changes that would log customers into Chrome without their knowledge. On Sunday, cryptography expert and professor at Johns Hopkins University, Matthew Green, called the company out in a blog post saying nobody on the Chrome development team has provided a reason as to why the change is necessary and that this has enormous implications for user trust and privacy. An engineer at Google responded saying users need to consent to a sync before their browser data is transferred. This all, though, coming the same week that Google, Twitter, and Amazon are due to testify yet again in front of the U.S. Senate to talk about privacy. Joining us now, the author of this blog, Matthew Green, and also with us, our Bloomberg head of global tech, Brad Stone. So, Matthew, I'll start with you. What are your biggest concerns here with this Chrome situation?
Well, Chrome is now the most popular desktop browser, which means a lot of people are doing very sensitive browsing with it. In the olden days, meaning a couple of weeks ago, you could use Chrome just as a browser without signing into Google. And now the requirement is that every time you use Chrome and you log into Google, any Google property like Gmail, Chrome is going to know who you are. It's going to be signed in from that point on.
Brad, at what point do we say Google has taken this too far? Google has taken this a step too far again.
Well, I mean, I think Google had a had a rational response to Matthew's blog post, right? They said that Chrome, is used on computers that are shared, that there's a lot of confusion, that customers have been complaining that maybe they log on to their Gmail and then, other people's information is getting synced with their account. But what Matthew, I think, really identified is the way in which Google is acting without a lot of transparency, without a lot of context for all the privacy questions this company has been facing, from, kids using YouTube and having their data shared to Google quietly using information from MasterCard to serve up ads to customers based on what they bought online. Google is operating in an era with a lot more transparency and scrutiny, and if they're going to make a move like this with a franchise like Chrome, they need to be more above board.
Matthew, you talk about how Google is treating trust as if it's a renewable resource. But in a way, though, is it? Because users have kept coming back, even as Google has violated privacy over and over again. I mean, this is certainly not the first and probably not the last time we're going to be talking about this.
Well, I think that Google has actually acquired a very good reputation with respect to privacy, and they've done that, despite the fact that we all know Google collects a lot of data. Their security is excellent, and they've managed to stay out of trouble. They don't get caught, for example, the way Facebook has, changing your settings without your consent, and they don't get caught having your data breached. So they've done a very good job. So whether they're collecting your data or not, they've kept people from noticing that. And this kind of change with Chrome, I think, is probably the first time they've really blown it on that front.
Meantime, Brad, there was an empty chair for Google at these hearings a couple of weeks ago. Sheryl Sandberg, Jack Dorsey showed up. Google would not send its CEO, did not send Larry Page, of course, CEO of Alphabet. What do you expect to see in the hearings coming up this week?
Yeah, not a lot. I mean, all the companies are sending either a chief privacy officer or an associate general counsel. We're going to get, I think, as the New York Times pointed out this morning, very legalistic answers to a lot of the questions that the Commerce Committee is going to have about, opt-in and opt-out and anonymized data. These are answers we've heard before from top executives who have testified before Congress. And what we really yet to get is, how these businesses work, how they are using the data they collect from us, sometimes without our consent, to inform the kinds of services they provide to us and to advertisers. And that's the way that these services have really been exploited. And I think Congress, we're at the beginning maybe of pressing the companies on this issue, but I don't think we're going to get much this week.
Matthew, you make the point that these companies know what they're doing. Google didn't do this by accident. So what do you want these lawmakers to ask these companies?
Well, I'd like to live in a world where companies like Google could self-regulate and we wouldn't have to worry about privacy concerns. But at the end of the day, we don't live in that world, and we need to do something about it. Europe has taken a very proactive approach to privacy, which I think is promising. And I hope that, once that experiment's been played out in Europe, we'll start to see the best parts of it adopted here in the U.S.
Brad, we haven't talked about Amazon and all of the devices unveiled last week, the privacy issues associated with
this.
Up. Right. Well, they didn't bring up, and well, now we are.
Right.
But we're talking about 70 new devices,
right,
that are listening to us in our cars. Amazon everywhere, as we discussed. Do you think that's something that Amazon has to further explain?
Well, I think that they view these events as speaking directly to customers, almost like, live advertisements. And I don't think they think that this is an issue for their customers. This is an issue for politicians, for regulators, for the media. And so, yes, they've got some stuff to explain. There have been some major mistakes with Alexa transferring live conversations of customers to somebody in their address book being kind of the big one. But what they say is that Alexa's not always listening, and the information is safeguarded and used to provide people with more accurate responses and better services. So I think like Google, Amazon has done a pretty good job with respect to customer privacy. But as Alexa becomes more prominent, more ingrained in everyday life, then yes, these are great questions to ask.
All right. Brad Stone, our senior executive editor for Global Tech. Thanks so much, as well as Matthew Green, professor at Johns Hopkins. Thanks so much, Matthew. Great to have you here on the show today. Coming up, do you want a free ride to the voting booth this year? Find out how. Plus, can't find your keys? Now your TV might be able to help. Smart tracking device company Tile is expanding its smart home innovation with a new partnership. This is Bloomberg. National Voter Registration Day is upon us. Fundamental to any healthy democracy is voter turnout, of course. But in recent U.S. elections, turnout has been less than ideal, with about 60% turnout in the presidential election years and only 40% turnout in the midterms. This year, a group of companies is hoping to encourage more people to vote. Joining forces are Walmart, Patagonia, Levi's, with a few tech standouts as well. Instagram announced it'll run ads in stories to help register voters, and ride-sharing giant Lyft has pledged the company will provide free and discounted rides on Election Day this year. Here to discuss, Raj Kapoor, Chief Strategy Officer at Lyft. So, Raj, how exactly is this going to work?
So, first of all, taking a step back, Lyft has always been around our mission and our values, and the mission is to improve people's lives with the best transportation, connecting communities and people. And what we found is that transportation is a big barrier. And so we've done things like relief rides in the recent Hurricane Florence that was there, helping people that have immigration issues, refugees, the 211 United Way call-in. So now we're extending that to voting. Our values are really important to us, and we think the best expression of a consumer's and a citizen's values is the ability to vote. The challenge has been, in the 2016 election, 15 million people that were registered didn't make it out to vote due to transportation issues. So we want to make a difference on that.
So where will rides be free? Where will they be discounted? How are you deciding this? Obviously, there's a lot of controversy around election mapping and who actually gets in the door.
Good questions. We are making the discounted rides available to anyone and everyone in the country.
Everyone gets a discounted ride.
Everyone gets a discounted ride. You can download the codes today on BuzzFeed and get those rides. And the discount is from wherever you are to, it's a geofenced area, to where your polling location is. We're in fact even going to help you find what your polling location is right in the app if you're not sure what it is. On free rides, what we've done is we've partnered with some of the top organizations that are helping the underserved communities. So, for example, Hispanics are even more impacted by the fact that they don't have transportation on voting day. And so we're working with Voto Latino, where they can distribute free rides to those particular people.
Are there any partisan implications here?
There is no partisan implication. This is a total nonpartisan action that we're taking, and it's available to everyone. We think that regardless of where you stand on the political issues, what's important is to vote.
So how much voting do you think this will actually drive?
We think that, as we've seen through elections, that they're often decided just by whether it's 10,000 on a local level or it could be hundreds of thousands, that we can have a real significant impact here, especially looking back at the 15 million people that had issues and the number of users that we have on Lyft. We had about 24 million users almost that were using Lyft in 2017. Big
ad in the New York Times on Sunday about this Time to Vote movement, a nonpartisan effort led by CEOs. What does this actually involve?
What that involves is making sure that these companies, including Lyft, are getting out the message for both their employees, their communities, their customers, everyone, the importance of voting. One of the examples that we're going to be doing along with that group is that there's a big difference in terms of whether you show up to vote if you plan ahead. So just helping people plan ahead, making sure that these organizations, including Lyft, give employees the proper time that they need to go do it. Who are they going to be voting with? When exactly are they going to do it?
So, some of the values you're talking about have stood in contrast to what Uber's values in the past have appeared to be, whether or not that's changed under new leadership. What can you tell us about, when I sat down with John Zimmer, the CEO, several months ago, he talked about how they saw a bump in traffic as a result of the delete Uber movement and customers having a preference for Lyft because of values. What are you seeing now? I mean, has that bump sustained? Are you seeing more users? Are you getting more users from Uber as a result of the sort of turmoil in the last year?
We think that that was probably one of several catalysts that have caused our market share to increase, and it continues to increase. But it's just one catalyst. What also matters is wait times for consumers, the quality of the experience, how they enjoy interacting with their driver that's there, and the prices that are there. And we've been improving across all of those areas.
You are also head of Lyft's self-driving business, head of business. How do you see that actually contributing to the broader Lyft pie in the future? How important is that business going to be?
I think it's really important. It's important to cities. It's important to communities because it impacts certain areas like safety. from a big perspective, as well as bringing the cost down of transportation, which is really important. We've noticed is that as we've been able to bring the cost of transportation down, more and more people are using it. We're encouraging mobility. It's helping the economy. And so we think that in the long run, this is where autonomous is going to take us. But it's not just about autonomous. What we've also committed to is having an autonomous electric shared fleet. All of those are really important to reduce congestion, to reduce emissions, and to bring the prices down and provide a great experience.
You talk about bringing prices down. There's a new legislation that could be passed soon that could mean 3.25% more percent tax on riders in San Francisco. How big an impact do you think this is going to have, given this is a huge market for you?
Yeah, you know, any time that there's an impact that is singling out a particular mode of transportation, it's not good. If it is something that, for example, is a congestion-related tax that impacts everything, we're all for it. But when we're singling out one mode, especially a mode where 35% and growing of lifts are shared and we're reducing the number of cars, we don't think it's the right policy.
All right. On track for the IPO, first half of next year, first quarter of next year, I believe we've reported?
Well, I can't comment on timing, but we are going to make those steps whenever it's right for us.
All right, Raj Kapoor, CSO of Lyft, thanks so much
Thank you
for stopping by.
Thank you.
Still ahead, Tile is tackling smart technology, how its new partnership just might take it to the next level. Next, this is Bloomberg. While both Amazon and Apple have had their share of the limelight these last 2 weeks, they aren't the only ones making headlines in smart devices. Tile, the company that makes those smart tracking dongles to help you find your stuff via your phone, announced a long-term partnership with Comcast. As part of the partnership, Comcast will invest in Tile and deploy the tech across its network of access points and set-top boxes. The two will also partner to create new smart home innovation. The announcement coincides with the appointment of the company's new CEO, CJ Prober. CJ is with me here in the studio. So this means that I can use my TV to help me find my stuff? Is that what this means?
Well, first, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, so one of the things to note about Tile is Tile started out as a device that you use for tracking things when you're in range of your phone. And we've had so much traction in the business, we've sold well over 15 million tiles and created this cloud-based finding platform. And our community really powers that. And the partnership with Comcast, from Tile's perspective, really helps take that to the next level because they're deploying Tile's finding capability across their network. What that allows us to do further is to enable smart home experiences for our joint consumers. So one of the things that we've already announced is you can use your Comcast voice remote to locate your tile within your home.
Okay, so I just ask my remote, where are my keys, and it will find it for me.
Exactly.
So how much business do you think this will actually drive?
Well, for us, our strategy at Tile is really to do three different things. We're looking to build out our community. So I'd mentioned, we've sold 15 million devices. We actively find 4 million tiles today. We're looking to then add new devices that are findable. So today, Tile is known as kind of the device that you buy at a Best Buy or at an Amazon, but what we're doing is we're launching new partnerships with companies like Bose and Skullcandy, where the Tile technology is integrated in their device. There's no additional hardware,
so
and those become findable.
So you don't need to have the dongle?
You don't need to have the dongle. Anything with Bluetooth can be Tile connected. And the great thing about that is over the next 5 years, we expect there to be 25 billion Bluetooth devices brought to market. And then the last thing, last pillar of our strategy is that we're building services on top of our experience. So Tile has historically been known as something, I use Tile because I have lost something, and we're shifting that to an experience where we help you prevent loss, we help you keep track of your things. And so there'll be some new things we'll be announcing soon along those lines.
So how much of a business driver do you think this Comcast
we think it's a pillar, one of the main pillars to that first bucket of building out our community. Now it's a U.S.-based Comcast install base today is U.S.-based, but we're obviously on the sidelines cheering for them this weekend as the bidding happened on Sky.
as you mentioned, you can buy your tiles on Amazon. It often comes up as you get your 16-pack. It's a stocking stuffer.
Yeah.
But Amazon has now come out with this whole new line of smart devices. Do you see Amazon as a competitor here?
No, they're actually a partner as well. So we're really focused on voice enablement. So today you can find your tiles in the home through Alexa, through Google Home, and we just launched a really great new experience with Apple where you can use Siri to find your things as well. So voice and being the Switzerland across those devices is important to us.
What are your expectations for the holidays? Speaking of stocking stuffers.
Yeah, so I can't say anything specific about our holiday plans today, but we have some really exciting news coming up over the coming weeks, and we're really bullish about this holiday.
Now, we have to ask about privacy. There are these questions about, what are you collecting? How long are you storing it? Where does that information go? Are you making money off of it?
Yeah.
And it seems like most companies will, go as far as they can until they get caught.
Yeah.
What are your policies on data collection?
It's a really great question. So privacy is at the foundation of the services that we offer. We don't use the data, we don't sell the data in a way that, we don't sell the data at all. We use the data to improve the experience for consumers. And one of the really important things to note is because there's a lot of things in the news about apps that track your location and make that information available. The location of your tiles is only available to you, unless you decide to share it with a friend or your spouse or your kids.
Well, it's also available to you, isn't it?
It is, but we treat it with the utmost privacy, and that's, that trust with our consumers is foundational to what we do, and that's going to continue going forward.
All right, new Tile CEO, CJ Prober, thank you so much
Thanks for having me.
for stopping by. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Reminder, tomorrow, Salesforce's Mark Benioff joins us right here on Bloomberg Technology from the Dreamforce conference in San Francisco. Do not miss that conversation. He always has a lot to say. This is Bloomberg.